Gunfire cracked through the narrow Seoul alley like thunder-splitting stone. Han Jae-suk pressed his back against the brick wall, his tailored suit jacket torn at the shoulder, blood seeping through the fabric from a grazing bullet wound. His men returned fire from behind abandoned crates, the muzzle flashes illuminating their grim faces in stuttering bursts of light. 3 of his soldiers were already down, their bodies sprawled across rain-slicked pavement that reflected the neon signs above like fractured mirrors. "Boss, we need to move now," his lieutenant shouted over the chaos, but Jae-suk remained still, calculating. The rival gang had superior numbers but inferior positioning. If they held for 30 more seconds, reinforcements would arrive and turn this ambush into a massacre. He raised his weapon and fired 3 precise shots. 2 men dropped from the fire escape above. The third shot shattered a street lamp, plunging half the alley into darkness. In the confusion, Jae-suk's reinforcements swept in from both ends, ending the skirmish with brutal efficiency. Later that night, as his personal doctor stitched the wound in his private office, Jae-suk stared at the Seoul skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows and thought about his father's final words before a bullet had ended his life 5 years ago. "In our world, son, love is the quickest path to the grave. Trust no one. Feel nothing. Survive everything." Jae-suk had built his empire on that philosophy, turning his father's modest organization into the most feared syndicate in Seoul. He was 32 years old and completely alone by design. Love was weakness. Attachment was vulnerability. He had seen what happened to men who forgot that truth. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the Han River, Zara Blake stood before a wall of television screens, her dark eyes tracking the news coverage of the shootout. The Korean reporter spoke rapidly, but she understood every word, her fluency in the language as natural as her native English. She wore an elegant black dress that contrasted beautifully with her deep brown skin, her natural hair styled in an elaborate updo that had taken her stylist 2 hours to perfect. "Another 6 dead," she murmured, her Nigerian accent softened by years of international education. "Father, this war is bleeding us dry." Raymond Blake appeared in the doorway behind her, a tall man in his 60s with graying hair and the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. He had built his arms-dealing empire from nothing, climbing out of Lagos street wars to become one of the most powerful black businessmen in Asia. When he found Zara as a traumatized 8-year-old orphan in the aftermath of a territorial dispute that had claimed her family, he had taken her in and raised her as his own daughter. "The Koreans started this fight," Raymond said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in this brutal world. "Han Jae-suk thinks he can control Seoul's shipping routes without paying tribute to the families who built them. He's young and arrogant." "He's also winning," Zara replied, turning to face her adoptive father. "We've lost 3 warehouses, 24 men, and the respect of our European contacts. They're starting to wonder if we're still strong enough to honor our commitments." Raymond's jaw tightened. "Which is why you'll attend the auction next week. Show them we're not afraid. Negotiate new terms with the Russians and the Yakuza. Make them understand that the Blake family still has teeth. And if Jae-suk is there, then you smile and remind him that this city doesn't belong to Korea alone. Africa has power here too, and we won't be pushed aside." Zara nodded, but something in her chest felt tight. She had studied Han Jae-suk extensively, reading every intelligence report, watching every piece of surveillance footage they could acquire. The man was a ghost, rarely appearing in public, conducting business through intermediaries and encrypted channels. But what she had learned painted a picture of someone far more complex than a simple gangster. He was educated, strategic, and surprisingly principled in a world without principles. He didn't deal in drugs or human trafficking, focusing instead on weapons and contraband luxury goods. He paid his men well and their families better if they died in his service. His reputation for violence was earned but never excessive. In another life, she thought, they might have been allies. In this one, they were destined to be enemies. The underground auction took place in an abandoned subway station beneath Seoul's financial district. The city had built new lines and forgotten the old ones, leaving a labyrinth of tunnels that criminal enterprises had claimed for their own purposes. Zara descended the steps with 2 bodyguards flanking her, her heels clicking against concrete as she entered a world of shadows and whispered deals. The auction room had been transformed into something almost elegant. Red velvet curtains hung from the curved ceiling, expensive champagne flowed freely, and the city's most dangerous people mingled like socialites at a charity gala. Zara recognized faces from intelligence briefings, Russian Brava captains, Yakuza lieutenants, Chinese triad enforcers, and representatives from a dozen smaller organizations fighting for scraps in Asia's criminal underworld. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and scanned the room, looking for potential allies and threats. That's when she saw him. Han Jae-suk stood near the far wall, surrounded by his inner circle but somehow separate from them. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, his dark hair styled with casual precision. But it was his face that arrested her attention. The intelligence photos hadn't captured the intensity of his gaze, the way his eyes seemed to catalog and assess everything with predatory focus. He was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and controlled power. As if sensing her scrutiny, his gaze shifted and locked onto hers across the crowded room. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, they simply stared at each other. Zara felt her pulse quicken, felt the weight of recognition pass between them even though they had never met. This was the man who had killed her father's allies. This was the enemy she had been trained to destroy. So why did looking at him feel like touching a live wire? The auction began, items ranging from military-grade weapons to stolen art to information on government officials who could be bought. Zara bid on several lots, establishing her presence and her family's continued financial strength. But she was acutely aware of Jae-suk's presence, of how he bid on nothing, simply watched and listened as if gathering intelligence for future use. When the auction ended, a neutral mediator approached her with a message. Mr. Han requests a private conversation. Negotiation Room 3. He guarantees your safety. Zara should have refused. Every instinct screamed that walking into a private room with her father's enemy was suicide. But curiosity won over caution, and 15 minutes later, she found herself sitting across a polished mahogany table from the most dangerous man in Seoul. Up close, Jae-suk was even more striking. A thin scar traced his left cheekbone, and his hands rested on the table with the relaxed confidence of someone who knew he could kill her before her bodyguards could react. But his expression wasn't hostile. If anything, he looked intrigued. "Miss Blake," he said in perfect English, his accent subtle and educated. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." "Mr. Han," she replied in flawless Korean, watching satisfaction flicker across his features. "I was curious what Seoul's king wanted with his rival's daughter." Direct. "I appreciate that." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, sliding one across to her. "I wanted to see if the reports were accurate." "Which reports?" "That Raymond Blake's adopted daughter is more dangerous than he is. That she speaks 6 languages, holds degrees from Oxford and Seoul National University, and has brokered more successful arms deals in 3 years than most dealers manage in a lifetime." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "That she's the real power behind the Blake empire, and her father is just the face." Zara sipped the whiskey, letting the burn ground her. "Flattery from the man who's been systematically destroying my family's operations. Should I be honored or suspicious?" "Both, probably." Jae-suk leaned back in his chair, studying her with those intense eyes. "Your father's generation built this city's underground. They deserve respect for that. But they're fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's tactics. The world is changing, Miss Blake. The old alliances don't hold. The old territories don't matter. We're moving toward a future where information is more valuable than bullets, where digital currencies replace briefcases full of cash. And you want to be the one who controls that future. I want to survive it. There's a difference." He paused, something shifting in his expression. "Your father thinks this is about territory. It's not. It's about adaptation. The families that can't evolve will die. I'm trying to give Seoul's underworld a path forward that doesn't end in everyone's destruction. By destroying the families that built it. By replacing the ones that refuse to change. Your father could have been my partner in this. I approached him 2 years ago with a proposal for collaboration. He told me to go back to my father's grave and ask for business advice there." Zara flinched. She remembered that meeting, remembered Raymond laughing about the arrogant young Korean who thought he could lecture his elders. At the time, she had laughed too. Now, sitting across from Jae-suk, she wondered what opportunities her father's pride had cost them. "So why am I here?" she asked quietly. "If my father refused you, why negotiate with me?" "Because you're not your father." You understand the game is changing. I see it in how you've restructured your European networks, how you've started laundering money through cryptocurrency instead of traditional banks. You're already adapting. You're just doing it while fighting me instead of with me. Are you offering an alliance? I'm offering a conversation. What happens after depends on whether you're as smart as I think you are. They talked for 2 hours. Zara couldn't remember the last time she had engaged in a discussion this stimulating, this intellectually challenging. Jae-suk wasn't just a gangster with ambition. He was a strategist with vision, someone who saw the criminal underworld as a business that needed innovation and reform. He spoke about creating neutral zones where different organizations could trade safely, about establishing courts to settle disputes without bloodshed, about building a structure that would outlast any individual leader. It was revolutionary. It was also naive. You're describing a utopia, Zara said finally. But this world runs on violence and fear. The moment you show weakness, someone will take advantage. I'm not suggesting we become pacifists. I'm suggesting we become civilized. There's a difference. He refilled her glass. Your father's generation built empires through brutality. But brutality is exhausting. It's expensive. It breeds resentment that eventually explodes into civil war. I'm proposing something sustainable. And if I told my father about this conversation, if I gave him the intelligence that you're planning a complete restructure of Seoul's underworld, then you'd prove you're not as smart as I thought, and we'd go back to killing each other until one of us is dead. He met her eyes. But I don't think you will. Because I think you see what I see. That this war is pointless. That we're stronger together than apart. That the real enemy isn't each other but the systems trying to destroy us all. Zara stood, her mind racing. I need to think about this. Take your time. But not too much time. The Russians are getting impatient, and the Yakuza are looking for any excuse to expand into territory we both claim. If we don't find common ground soon, we'll both lose everything to outside forces. She walked to the door, then paused. You're the man who kills my father's peace talks. And you're the woman who ruins his business deals. Jae-suk smiled slightly. But maybe that means we understand each other better than anyone else could. Zara left the subway station with her bodyguards, but her mind remained in that negotiation room, replaying every word, every glance, every moment of unexpected connection. She had expected a monster. Instead, she had found someone who challenged everything she thought she knew about this world. It was dangerous. It was foolish. It was absolutely the last thing she should be feeling. But she wanted to see him again. 3 weeks later, a charity gala brought Seoul's elite together in a downtown hotel ballroom. The event was hosted by a diplomat known for facilitating back-channel communications between legitimate businesses and less legitimate enterprises. It was neutral ground where enemies could mingle without fear of violence, where deals were discussed over champagne and hors d'oeuvres instead of guns and threats. Zara attended with her father, playing the role of dutiful daughter while her mind catalogued every face, every conversation, every potential opportunity. Raymond worked the room with practiced ease, shaking hands and making promises, still believing he could maintain his empire through force of personality and reputation. She saw Jae-suk the moment he entered. He wore a dark gray suit that made him look more businessman than gangster, and he moved through the crowd with the same calculating grace she had noticed at the auction. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and something electric passed between them. An hour later, as her father engaged in animated conversation with a Japanese arms manufacturer, Zara slipped away to the balcony for air. The Seoul night was clear and cold, the city lights spreading below like a carpet of stars. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning who it was. Stalking me, Mr. Han. Appreciating the view, Miss Blake. Jae-suk joined her at the railing, maintaining a respectful distance. Your father seems in good spirits. He always is at these events. He loves playing the king, even as his kingdom crumbles. That's harsh. That's honest. Zara turned to face him. I've been thinking about your proposal. About restructuring the underworld, creating sustainable systems, building something that lasts. And I think you're right. But I also think my father would rather die than admit someone half his age sees the future more clearly than he does. Jae-suk moved closer, and Zara's breath caught. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the subtle cologne he wore, could feel the heat radiating from his body despite the cold air. Then maybe we work around him, Jae-suk said quietly. Build the future we want and invite him to join when he's ready. That's called betrayal in my family. That's called survival in mine. They stood in charged silence, the air between them humming with possibility and danger. Zara knew she should walk away. Knew that whatever was building between them could only end in disaster. But she couldn't move, couldn't break eye contact, couldn't stop her heart from racing. Dance with me, Jae-suk said suddenly. What? Inside. There's music. Dance with me where everyone can see. Let them wonder what it means. It was reckless and provocative and absolutely the wrong thing to do. Zara took his offered hand. They returned to the ballroom where a string quartet played classical music for couples swaying across the marble floor. Jae-suk pulled her close, his hand settling on her lower back with possessive confidence. They moved together with surprising synchronization, as if they had been dancing together for years instead of seconds. Everyone staring, Zara murmured, acutely aware of the shocked faces surrounding them. Let them stare. Let them talk. Let them wonder if the war is ending or just getting started. And which is it? I don't know yet. But I know I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that negotiation room. I know that's dangerous and stupid and probably going to get us both killed. His grip tightened slightly. But I also know I don't care. Zara's pulse hammered in her throat. This is insane. Completely. My father will. I know. Your people will. I know. The song ended, and they stood motionless while other couples continued dancing around them. The moment stretched, taut and fragile, until Jae-suk leaned close and whispered, "Meet me. Tomorrow night. The temple on Namsan Mountain. Midnight." Before she could respond, he released her and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Zara stood frozen on the dance floor, her body still humming from his touch, her mind screaming warnings her heart refused to hear. She should have ignored the invitation. Should have told her father everything. Should have let security handle whatever this dangerous attraction was becoming. Instead, at 11:45 the next night, she climbed the steps to the abandoned temple on Namsan Mountain, her heart pounding with anticipation and terror. Jae-suk waited in the temple courtyard, illuminated by moonlight filtering through the bare trees. He looked different in casual clothes, leather jacket, dark jeans, more human and somehow more dangerous for it. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I shouldn't have. But you did." He closed the distance between them. "That means something. It means I'm an idiot. It means I'm betraying my father. It means I'm playing with fire and pretending I won't get burned. It means you feel what I feel." His hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. "That this is bigger than our families, bigger than the war, bigger than anything either of us has experienced before." Zara should have pulled away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "This can't work. You know that, right? There's no version of this story where we both survive. Then maybe we rewrite the story." He kissed her, and Zara felt the world tilt. His mouth was warm and demanding, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until no space existed between them. She kissed him back with equal desperation, months of tension and attraction exploding into physical contact that felt inevitable and catastrophic all at once. They broke apart breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, both trembling with adrenaline and desire. "My place," Jae-suk said roughly. "Now." They barely made it through the door of his private apartment before they were pulling at each other's clothes, stumbling toward the bedroom in a tangle of limbs and desperate kisses. They made love with the intensity of people who knew they were stealing something precious and forbidden, who understood that every moment together was a moment borrowed against a future that would demand payment. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets with Seoul's lights glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Zara traced the scars on Jae-suk's chest and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just physical attraction. This wasn't just rebellion against her father's authority. This was real and terrifying and absolutely impossible. "Tell me about your family," she said quietly. "The real story, not the intelligence reports." So he did. He told her about growing up watching his father build an empire through violence, about witnessing his mother's murder by a rival gang when he was 12, about inheriting everything at 27 after his father was assassinated. He spoke about the isolation of leadership, the weight of constantly making decisions that determined whether people lived or died. He confessed that he had never loved anyone, never allowed himself that vulnerability, never believed it was possible in his world. Until you, he finished, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Until I met someone who understood this life, who didn't flinch from the darkness, who saw me as more than just a criminal or a kingpin. Zara's turn came next. She told him about Lagos, about losing her parents when armed men stormed their home in a territorial dispute, about Raymond finding her in the aftermath and choosing to raise someone else's child as his own. She spoke about the pressure of being black in Asia's criminal underworld, of constantly having to prove she was more than her father's diversity project, of loving Raymond while resenting the empire he had built on blood and violence. He saved me, she said, tears threatening. But sometimes I wonder if he saved me for me or for himself. If I'm his daughter or his project, his legacy, or his puppet. You're your own person, Jae-suk said firmly. Everything you've accomplished, you earned. Don't let anyone take that from you. They talked until dawn, sharing secrets and dreams and fears they had never voiced to another living soul. When Zara finally left his apartment, she felt changed fundamentally, as if the woman who had climbed those temple steps had been replaced by someone braver and more reckless. Over the following months, they met in secret. Coffee shops in neighborhoods where neither family operated. Hotel rooms registered under false names. A weekend trip to Jeju Island where they could pretend to be normal people in love instead of heirs to warring criminal empires. They texted in code, called from burner phones, became experts at deception. Zara knew it couldn't last. Knew that eventually someone would notice her absences, would follow her, would discover the truth. But she couldn't stop. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, understood, cherished. Jae-suk made her laugh, challenged her intellectually, supported her ambitions while pushing her to be better. With him, she wasn't Raymond Blake's daughter or a token black woman in a Korean-dominated world. She was simply Zara, brilliant, passionate, and worthy of love. The discovery came on a Tuesday afternoon. Raymond's head of security, a man named Marcus who had been with the family since before Zara's adoption, requested an emergency meeting. When she entered the study, she found her father standing by the window, his posture rigid with fury. "How long?" Raymond asked without turning. Zara's blood turned to ice. "Father, I don't." "How long have you been sleeping with Han Jae-suk?" He turned, and the pain in his eyes was worse than any anger. "How long have you been betraying this family?" "I haven't betrayed anyone. I fell in love." "Love?" Raymond's voice cracked. "Love with the man who's been trying to destroy everything I built. The man who killed my best friend's son. The man who's stolen half our territory. He's not what you think. If you would just listen. I trusted you, Zara. I raised you. I gave you everything. And you repay me by spreading your legs for my enemy." The words hit like a physical blow. Zara stepped back, her hands clenched into fists. "That's not fair. You don't know him. You don't know what we have. I know he's using you to get to me. I know he's manipulated my own daughter into being his spy. I'm not his spy. I haven't given him any intelligence. I haven't compromised our operations. I've kept everything separate." "Until when?" Raymond demanded. "Until he asks you to choose between him and your family." "What happens then, Zara? When he makes you prove your loyalty by helping him destroy me?" She had no answer because she had wondered the same thing during sleepless nights. What would she do if forced to choose? Could she really turn her back on the men who had saved her life, given her a home, loved her as his own? But could she survive losing Jae-suk, the only person who had ever seen all of her and loved what he saw? "I love you, Father," she said finally, her voice breaking. "But I love him too. And I'm begging you to find a way to make peace. To end this war before it destroys us all. There is no peace with men like him. There's only survival." Raymond moved to his desk, pulling out a folder thick with photographs and documents. "While you've been playing house with the enemy, I've been preparing. In 3 days, I'm moving against Jae-suk's operations. I'm taking back what he stole, and I'm ending his organization permanently. You can't. Father, please. It's already done. The wheels are in motion. And you're going to stay in this house under guard until it's finished. I won't have you warning him or getting caught in the crossfire. You're making a mistake. He's more powerful than you think. This will start a war that Seoul can't survive. Then Seoul burns. Raymond's expression was granite. I've lost too much to back down now. And if that disappoints you, if that costs me your love, then that's the price I pay for protecting my family. Zara tried everything. Pleading, reasoning, threatening to leave. But Raymond was immovable, and within an hour, she found herself locked in her room with guards stationed outside her door. She tried her phone only to discover it had been remotely disabled. She was completely cut off, unable to warn Jae-suk about the attack coming in 3 days. Panic clawed at her chest. Raymond wasn't bluffing. He would launch a full-scale assault on Jae-suk's convoy during a scheduled meeting with Russian contacts. It would be brutal and decisive, designed to eliminate the Korean boss and cripple his organization in a single strike. Zara paced her room like a caged animal, her mind racing through possibilities. The window was 3 stories up with guards patrolling below. The door was solid oak with commercial-grade locks. Even if she escaped, she had no phone, no money, no way to reach Jae-suk before the attack. She was still searching for options when the attack came early. The explosion shook the house at 2 a.m., shattering her bedroom window and throwing her to the floor. Alarms blared. Gunfire erupted. Zara scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering, and looked out the broken window to see 3 black SUVs in the driveway, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness. Raymond had been wrong about the timing. Somehow, Jae-suk had learned about the planned attack and decided to strike first. Zara ran to her door, pounding on it until the guard opened it a crack. "Let me out. I need to stop this." "Miss Blake," your father said. "My father is going to die if someone doesn't de-escalate this situation. Let me out now." The guard hesitated, then made a decision. He unlocked the door, and Zara sprinted down the hallway toward her father's study. She found Raymond barricaded behind his desk with Marcus and 2 other guards, all armed, all preparing for a last stand. "Father, please. Call a ceasefire. Let me negotiate. Get her out of here." Raymond shouted, but before anyone could move, the study door exploded inward. Jae-suk stood in the doorway surrounded by his men, his weapon drawn, his expression cold and lethal. His eyes swept the room and landed on Zara, surprise flickering across his features. "You," he said, his voice hard. "You're here." "Don't shoot," Zara said, positioning herself between the 2 men she loved most. "Jae-suk, please. Don't do this. Your father was planning to kill me. I have evidence of the attack orders, the timeline, everything. This is self-defense." "No, it's murder. It's revenge. It's everything you said you wanted to move past." She turned to Raymond. "And you, father. You were going to start a war without even trying diplomacy first. You were going to let your pride destroy Seoul." "Zara, move," Raymond said, his weapon trained on Jae-suk. "No. That's an order, daughter." "I said no." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I won't watch you kill each other. I won't be the reason this city burns. So you both have a choice. You can shoot through me to get to each other, or you can put down your weapons and actually talk like the intelligent men I know you both are." The standoff held for 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then, slowly, Jae-suk lowered his weapon. His men looked at him like he'd lost his mind, but he ignored them, his eyes locked on Zara's face. "I came here to end this," he said quietly. "To make sure your father could never threaten me again. But I didn't come here to hurt you. I didn't know you were here. Well, I am. And I'm asking you to stand down. Both of you. Please." Raymond looked at his daughter, at the tears streaming down her face, at the desperate hope in her eyes. Something in his expression cracked. "Everyone out," he said finally. "Except Jae-suk and my daughter." The room cleared slowly, guards and gangsters eyeing each other suspiciously as they filed into the hallway. When only the 3 of them remained, an exhausted silence fell. I should kill you, Raymond said to Jae-suk. You should try, Jae-suk replied evenly. Stop it. Zara snapped. Both of you need to stop treating this like a testosterone competition and start acting like leaders. Father, Jae-suk has ideas for restructuring Seoul's underworld that could benefit everyone, including us. He's not trying to destroy you. He's trying to modernize a system that's failing. And Jae-suk, my father built this empire from nothing. He deserves respect and a seat at the table, not elimination. He called me a child playing at being a gangster, Jae-suk said. You told him to consult his father's grave, Zara countered. You're both prideful idiots who would rather die than admit someone else might have valid points. Raymond actually laughed, a short bitter sound. She's not wrong. Your mother would have said the same thing, Zara. Then listen to her, Zara pleaded. Both of you. Find a way to work together before this war destroys everything you've built. The negotiation lasted until dawn. Zara mediated, pushed, argued, and occasionally threatened both men until they began to find common ground. Jae-suk would get control of digital operations and cryptocurrency laundering. Raymond would maintain traditional weapons trafficking and European connections. They would create a council of Seoul's major families to adjudicate disputes, with both of them as founding members. Territory would be restructured based on capability rather than history. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even particularly fair. But it was survival, and that had to be enough. When they finally shook hands, Raymond looked at his daughter with something like pride and sorrow mixed together. You love him. Yes. And he loves you. Jae-suk answered before Zara could. More than I thought possible. More than is probably wise. Then you understand what it costs, Raymond said quietly. Loving someone in this world. The vulnerability. The fear. The knowledge that your enemies will use that love as a weapon. I understand. But I'm willing to pay that cost. Raymond nodded slowly. Then here's my price for peace. You marry her. Properly, publicly, with both families in attendance. You make her your wife, not your secret, and you protect her with everything you have. Because if anything happens to my daughter, if she's hurt because of your enemies or your choices, this truce ends and I will burn your empire to ash. Clear. Crystal. They married 6 weeks later in a ceremony that was part peace treaty, part spectacle, part genuine celebration. Zara wore traditional Nigerian attire for the first part of the ceremony and a Korean hanbok for the second, honoring both aspects of her identity. The guest list read like a who's who of Asian organized crime, everyone curious to see if this alliance would hold or if it was just a beautiful prelude to more bloodshed. But it held. Through the first year, through challenges from outside organizations who tested the new power structure, through internal dissent from people who preferred the old ways, Zara became the bridge between families, the diplomat who could navigate both worlds, the voice of reason when old grudges threatened new peace. She also became Jae-suk's true partner, not just in name but in practice. They rebuilt Seoul's underworld together, creating systems that were more efficient, less violent, and ultimately more profitable. They had their enemies, their setbacks, their moments of doubt. But they faced everything together, two people who had chosen love over loyalty to the past, who had decided that building a future was worth the risk of betrayal. 2 years after their marriage, Zara stood in the conference room of a newly established legitimate shipping company, their joint venture that would eventually replace their criminal operations entirely. Through the window, she could see Seoul stretching endlessly, a city that had been their battleground and was now becoming their legacy. Jae-suk entered, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Lost in thought. Just remembering how we got here. The violence. The fear. The impossible choices. Regrets. Not one. She turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. You made me believe love didn't have to be weakness. That it could be the strongest thing we build. You taught me it was worth building for. He kissed her softly. The lawyers finalized the African expansion papers. Your company launches next month. Zara smiled. She was establishing her own investment firm, focused on bringing legitimate business opportunities to Africa while maintaining the connections that would keep both their families powerful in the changing landscape. It was ambitious and risky and absolutely what she wanted. Think Seoul's ready for what comes next? She asked. I think Seoul has no choice. We're the future, Zara. We're what happens when people stop fighting yesterday's wars and start building tomorrow's peace. If you've stayed with us through this epic journey of forbidden love and dangerous alliances, make sure you subscribe for more intense stories that will keep your heart racing. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Could love really conquer a world built on violence? Should Zara and Jae-suk have walked away from each other to protect their families? Don't forget to like this video and share it with anyone who loves powerful romance against impossible odds. Somewhere in Seoul, in the shadows between legitimate business and criminal empire, two people who should have been enemies built something that might actually last. And as they stood watching the city lights flicker to life beneath the twilight sky, they allowed themselves to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, love could rewrite the rules of war. Retry Claude can make mistakes.